Welcome to our new podcast series called In the Mix. I am Wynn Darden. I'm the business manager for the Lumiflon FEVE fluoropolymer resins. The podcasts are all about choosing the right coating solutions, where we discuss with industry experts what influences their decision-making processes when it comes to specifying and using coatings. We'll delve into how experts develop their strategic planning approach to current structural and future market demands. In our first episode, we'll talk with Fiona Levin of IFS Coatings and Rowan Georges of SOM New York City on how they, as a coating supplier and architect, develop and meet the requirements of a coating spec in the architectural space. They will educate us on their processes and hopefully talk about some of the challenges that they get along the way for this. So I thank you very much for joining us today. If you guys can give an introduction of yourselves, give us your background and everything, I think that's a good place to start.
Great, thanks, Wynn, for welcoming us. My name is Rowan Georges. I am the lead specifications writer at SOM. I sit in the New York office, but I also sit over all of the firm-wide specification writers. And I've been at SOM now for upwards of 18 years. It's been a great run, and I look forward to working on great projects using Lumiflon coatings, and great to be here.
So my name's Fiona Levin-Smith. I work at IFS Coatings. I've been working in powder coatings for 16 or 17 years now, originally in Europe, and then I implanted to the US about 10 years ago, which is about how long I've known Rowan now, I think, about 10 years. And I look after the architectural specification side at IFS Coatings as well, which is a lot of fun and keeps me out of trouble.
That's good. Good to hear it. And we'll probably see you at AIA, would be my guess.
Yes, sir. And Rowan.
I will be there.
Very
as well.
good. Okay. All right. Well, great. I hope to see both of you there. You guys are intimately familiar with the design process and also the specification process for coatings.
So historically, when we do a facade, which is where we would use the FEVE coatings, we start with a palette, and the colors and the sheen from that palette are derived basically from a design or what we're comfortable with, what we've used in the past. And so for us, you cannot separate performance of the actual coating from the selection and the sheen. So they go hand in hand. And so we start with ALMA 2605 compliant coatings. And more recently, within the last 10 or so years, we've been focused on getting powder coating as the kind of default for any of our coatings. Again, with an eye towards performance. In recent times, powder coating has enjoyed more use in the Northeast, and that's important because we view that as more environmentally friendly than the other choices on the market. And so we've been leaning heavily in the last 3.5 years doing our research into why powder coatings are better, and we've tried to do a good job in convincing our clients in going that direction, where historically liquid coatings have enjoyed the lion's share of the market, but we see some inroads being made in the powder coating industry.
Okay, well, we like to hear that as a powder coating resin supplier, so that's good to us. So you typically work with the ALMA 2605 standard as the one that you shoot for, is that right?
That's correct, and there are some caveats there that we can go into more detail, but yes, typically for our exterior facing components, ALMA 2605 is the SOM standard, and then for anything on the interior, we have started doing ALMA 2604, whereas before we would default to 2603, but we see value in bumping it up to 2604.
Fiona, what do you do? How do you and Rowan interact with each other when you get a project like this?
Whether it's Rowan or where else the the project is, then quite often they'll come to us and say, okay, we're looking at a coating for this specific project. And our first question is, what is the performance? Obviously, if we're talking to Rowan, then we know it's going to be 2605 for exterior. If it's elsewhere, then that, there's different levels of education on powder coating. So we might try and help educate to the different types of powder coating, because quite often people don't realize that there are different types or architectural grades of powder, if that's a better way to put it, and that you can get 2603, 2604, 2605 types of powder. So we might do a little bit of education there. And then obviously with SOM and Rowan, we know it's going to be 2605. So then it's literally, okay, what is the color and the sheen that you're going for, the gloss that you're going for. And then we would look to see what we have available already, existing, stock colors or pre-formulated, something that we've made in the past. We'd send out samples and colors for the architectural team to look at. And then if they like one of those, then great. If it's we kind of like somewhere between this one and this one, then it becomes a custom color match. And we would match that for them. We turn those matches around pretty quickly and send the panels back, and then it's a tweaking process till we get the exact color that they're looking for. And then that product code that, that it's an FEVE Lumiflon fluoropolymer would, that information plus the product code plus the color name and the gloss would go to Rowan, and that's what makes it into the spec.
Right. And I will qualify that when that 2605 statement for exterior only, right? And so we know that, once you go to 2603, for instance, there are a lot more choices in terms of specular quality and textures, et cetera, that we might use for interior applications. But the 2605 is primarily used for our monumental exterior high-rise projects.
Okay. Now you mentioned environmental considerations as being a driving factor for using powder coatings. Which ones of those are they? They have no solvents. That's a pretty good reason right there.
We look at everything. So from the actual content of the resin to also how the manufacturing plant is powered. All of these are factors for us. But yes, the biggest one obviously is no solvents, and then the ability for it to be reused. Anything that is not used on the first pass, it can be reused. So those are big factors where competitively, if you were to compare it against liquids, they don't really they don't really match up.
And I think some of the other areas as well, when that can be advantageous, is like Rowan says, obviously no solvents means no VOCs, so that's a huge advantage for the design community. Likewise, the ability to reclaim and then reuse or recycle. But there can be differences in the pre-treatment. So powder does not have to go over chrome pre-treatment; it can go over non-chrome pre-treatment. So that can help with a design push. It has a great embodied carbon footprint comparatively. And so we also have environmental product declarations, EPDs, including one for our fluoropolymer powder range. And so having that information available, the EPD that we can send to somebody like Rowan, who can then use that in the discussion and get all the environmental information from that EPD. We have that for our 2605, obviously the Lumiflon powders that we create. We also have it for 2604 and 2603 powders as well. But having that is a help, and that obviously contributes as well.
Yeah, and to that point, when we are now requiring for all of our projects that EPDs are a submittal requirement, and so that is a huge plus for powder coating. I think all of the major manufacturers have EPDs, and that's great. And so we're asking for all of our projects to produce EPDs for our coatings.
Okay, yeah, and I think we're supplying information as well into that area. Obviously, we have a different view of the business, I think, than you guys do, but we do supply information to people who are doing EPDs. Now, what about lead credits? I'm a one step removed from where you guys are, but when we talk to architects, they do ask about things like that, and we kind of think we know what's available. But what do you guys look at as far as lead goes in specing a coating like that?
Well, I think, the current version of LEED 4.1, building product optimization for transparency documentation like EPDs and healthy product declarations gets you credit. So, it's same as the discussion as before. EPDs go a long way in getting us there. So the recycled content and also the low embodied carbon emissions are valuable. I would say, the majority of our domestic projects shoot for LEED certification in some way, and there are other sustainable design platforms that our international projects also ascribe to.
Have you seen an uptick in the number of lead projects? Or
It's becoming the norm as we struggle or wrestle rather with you know many architecture firms have signed on to the 2030 and 2040 goals um, to reach net zero. So, yeah, I would say for the most part there has been an uptick in those projects. Obviously, if it's a private developer client who may not necessarily need to comply with LEED, a lot of these developers are shooting for it regardless because they see it as the smart thing to do, since many of their tenants have also ascribed to more sustainable buildings and tenant fit outs. So yes, I think both in the public and private realm, LEED or sustainability in general is very much on the minds of people who own the buildings and people who occupy those spaces.
Are there any other standards that you look at? We have things that are out there like the red list and some of these other measuring organizations, I guess, or they're looking for material quality and things like that.
Yeah, I think LEED tries to cover all of that under their general umbrella for sustainable practices. So, the red lists and other transparency documentation or data points all feed into those healthy product declarations that are required that give you that credit for building optimization. So yeah, the red list is one. I'm sure there are many others around the globe that publish these data points. We wish at some point everything becomes more standardized so that we're not like checking a million and one lists. But again, it goes back to doing what's right, both in terms of the environment, but also doing what's right in terms of the chemical content and healthy material choices.
I think that's a conversation that we've had for a long time as well, isn't it? About that it's whether you're designing to lead standards or whether as an architectural practice you subscribe to aim towards sustainable design, then it's choosing products that can help you achieve that, whether that's an actual lead credit or whether that's the okay, we want to be a sustainable design practice, so let's push that forward.
Yeah, and I think for us at SOM, whether or not a building or a project is pursuing LEED certification, we want our spec to be the most environmentally conscious spec, and also the most health conscious spec. And so, regardless of if you're pursuing that platform or not, what's in our spec is going to be what we feel is the most responsible for the environment and for the occupants of the building.
What would you like to see if you can change anything in the powder coating or add properties or uh, attributes? I guess what would you like to see in a powder coating?
So, this has been my my kind of calling card when it comes to powder coating, right? So I'll give you anecdotally how I even got here. Back in 2010, I believe, I was working on a project in Mexico City, and all of the extrusions were coming from Europe, which meant, they were going to be powder coated. We would traditionally were a liquid coating firm, and that's all we specified that would meet on 2605. And so when I first got the samples that were being produced out of Europe that were powder coated, they were not as specular, as glossy as I would have liked. And so in general, my feeling was, well, why would I ever, specify powder if they're not going to look as glossy as I would have been accustomed to with liquid? And so the question you asked, what would I like to see? I would like to see the AMA 2605 powder coatings improve upon, their specular quality. I know that we can do it in 2603 and even 2604, where we get some more exotic metallic finishes. It would be great if we had that same quality in 2605. I know it's asking a lot. If you not just the IFS coatings, but any one of the manufacturers that come to see me, I say the same thing every time I see them. Can we improve upon the specular quality of the 2605?
Yeah, we do a lot of research and obviously trying to meet the different requests, and that's one request obviously from Rowan. We get all sorts of other um, requests in terms of different colors that are maybe more difficult to achieve, like a red brick one, I
Right.
think was one that we talked about
Mhm.
last time I was here. And that comes back down to pigment availability and that type of thing that makes it more difficult to achieve some of the colors. I think we've come a long way in terms of what we can do with metallics, and that's improving and changing all the time. Um, Likewise, with some of the things that we can do in powder that you can't do in liquid, like some of the speckle, or almost a speckle, which makes it sound much bigger than it is. I don't know how else to describe it. It's much smaller, and it gives the coating a very kind of good depth and a lot of texture without being physical texture. You don't touch it and feel a texture. It really gives it that kind of slight speckle and a lot of depth to the coating, and we can achieve that in a 2605 coating. So there's a lot of things that we can do. Even the wood grain stuff now is becoming available in 2605. So there are things that we can do, but there's always a wish list, right?
Right.
And when it comes to gloss, we really have a nice range of gloss that we can do in 2605, whether that's down to, the kind of matte low gloss um, sheens, or whether all the way up to about a 70 gloss is possible with a 2605 powder coating. So if to extend that even further, obviously would be great, but we want to do that without negatively affecting the weathering capability. And that's sometimes what holds us back in developing some of those colors or some of those gloss levels or whatever, the effect that we're being asked to develop is. Sometimes it's because we can do it, but it's going to negatively affect the weathering capability. And we're choosing 2605 to have good weathering capability. It's the best there is. So we don't want to affect that. It would be, it would negate the point of using that in the first place.
But Fiona's right. I mean, they have come a long way since 2010. I mean, what was available in 2010 was really basic for 2605. And so they have made significant inroads in giving us more options. We'd like to see more, just as much as you've done for 2604 and 2603, but I know that it's a slow process. But again, for us, you know, uh, performance and aesthetics cannot be separated. So they have to perform and they have to look great.
Yeah, and that's one of the advantages of the FEVE, of course, is you can do that range of gloss. And we do have our own lab over here in the U.S. Where we do powder coatings. And one of the things we're working on, we work on metallics as well. So we think there's a big opportunity there for that. So, do you guys see design complexity increasing in any of the projects upcoming these days?
That's, I guess, a relative term. There's always innovation. I like to frame it in that way, in terms of how the designs are derived. But I think, like just like anything else in the industry, everything evolves with technology. So I would say, making things automated seems to be the next iteration, or even AI we see as an iteration of how to arrive at a design. And the question will always be, well, how does the fabrication or manufacturing process catch up with that, or is it a step behind, or is it some on a different track? And so that's always been a challenge, I think, in the industry. But I think, just like anything else, everything evolves in time. So the question will always be: are we, as architects and designers, current with the industry in terms of practices, or are we doing something that's counter to what the industry can do?
Do you think is North America kind of a typical market for you? I know you mentioned Mexico City. You guys are doing work down there. Do you see this as North America as being distinct and separate from other parts of the world, or do you think everybody's demanding the same thing around the world? Is it something consistent?
I think if we were to talk about FEVE powder, um, Northeast has probably been leading the charge. I think North America in general has been a liquid market, um, and so we've been trying our best to kind of flip that. Some areas more successful than others, obviously, but we work globally all over the world, and so we do lots of work in the Middle East where FEVE is used. Um, China as well, Far East, Europe, they all are solid markets for powder coat. Um, North America is not quite there yet, but we're trying our best to get it there.
Yeah, I think so. You're doing a pretty good job because we see our resin sales increasing at multiple tens of percentages every year. So we think last year was a breakout year, and we think this year is going to be even better for powder. So yeah, do you have any other aspects of this you'd like to talk about, Rowan and Fiona?
Well, I just had one, which is, we are very active in engaging not just, Fiona, or not just Lumiflon, but everyone, including the applicators, even ownership, in creating partnerships and making sure that everyone's on the same page with this whole embodied carbon, environmental, and even healthy material issues. Making sure that we are all engaged in the process of moving this forward and not doing business as usual. Making sure that we're addressing this global crisis. And so um, we've been in talks with all of the major suppliers, and even the applicators. So we're trying to set up a meeting with one of our favorite applicators here in North America, doing plant tours and making sure we visit their facilities. And one thing that has been useful is having them explain to us what the process is of how we can get consistency, not just with you know, powder coated extrusions, but how that consistency translates to things like, you know, metal panels, even steel guardrails, etc. So that if we have a color or a sheen that we want to be repeated throughout a project, that there is a method by which we can achieve that while also achieving the performance and the environmental requirements that our specifications cover. So collaboration is key for us.
And honestly, Win, I think kudos to Rowan as well over the last 10 years of being one of the spec writers that even 10 years ago was adding powder into the project specs and reaching out to not just me, to the other powder suppliers as well to help with, making sure that the wording in the spec is correct because specifying powder the wording is a little bit different to what you would use and liquid, and I can testify to the number of times I've had a GC call me and say, "Hey, I need your 3-coat powder system," and it's like it doesn't exist, and here's why, you know. So, just making those changes and taking the time, and I think Rowan was again trailblazing and adding powder into the spec, putting it up there, putting it first, not taking liquid out, but adding it in there so that you can get the most sustainable product, you know, when it's available, and then helping to work, like you say, like Ron says, working with applicators, working with the different suppliers of whatever that, you know, who might be using different coatings, whether it's powder or not, and asking, you know, for them to consider powder and adding that into their repertoire, into their supply chain, so that we can help with pushing, you know, the industry towards the more sustainable types of coatings. And kudos to Rowan for doing that for over 10 years now.
Yeah, and we try to do that as best we can. Of course, we have a different perspective than you guys do, but we try to get our powder technology out to as many people as we can. So we call on architects and curtain wall suppliers and things like that. We're also doing things like presentations at kind of general coating symposia. So rather than sticking to the powder coating area, we're going out into the general market and trying to do exactly that, get people more acquainted with powder and what the advantages are for them. And hopefully we can start to grow the market. There's a lot of aluminum extrusions are used in curtain wall right now, but there's a lot of steel that's used that could be powder coated as well. So these are things that we look at and try to get out there with our technical guys.
Do you guys Rowan, do you guys use a lot of powder coated steel as well, or does it tend to be on aluminum? Like, what's the
So yeah, the majority obviously will be aluminum, but we have seen an uptick in things like guardrails for steel. But that's an interesting conversation because there's this whole other side of the embodied carbon discussion that aluminum is not great. And so we're looking at, what if we did a curtain wall out of steel? What would that cost? What would that look like? And so we have been in conversation with, various steel curtain wall suppliers in trying to convince them to come over to the North American market. And then obviously we're saying, well, if you come over, we want you to use powder coating as well. So it's been great. It's been great, this whole exploration into what else is available on the market to address embodied carbon. And so I think you guys are positioned well because you can go on both aluminum and steel. And so as we see more and more steel curtain walls and more and more steel components being used because of environmental reasons, it's a great win for powder coating.
Yeah, and we'll continue to look at things like that. We're one of the other things we do in the lab. We're looking at low temperature curing products, so we can get onto things like fiberglass and other type materials, mainly for the window market. But some of these polymeric materials are becoming more common and are being used in applications other than windows. And I would love to switch that business over to powder. It's going to take some work, but all of these things are going to gain traction, I think, as people you look to do things like reduce energy in the window market. The big advantage of powder coatings is, I'm sorry, FRP is you don't have to insulate. The FRP does it for you. You don't need the insulating spacers when you put the windows together, and that's a big advantage to some of these manufacturers going into some of these projects. So I think innovation is something that is really key to the marketplace, and we want you guys to come, just as Fiona does. We want you guys to feel free to come to us so we can start looking at stuff that's interesting to you as well.
Great. Well, thanks for having us. I think, for SOM, it's very important for us to stay connected with industry. And so if there's any innovation that can be beneficial or anything that you think will be upcoming in the market that we need to have eyes on, we're more than happy to make that connection with you and to stay connected that way.
Thank you, Win, as well from IFS. You guys are so important to us at IFS Coatings as our resin supplier. So we appreciate all that you do for us. And yeah, thanks for the invite. It's been fun.
All right. Well, thank you guys. We really appreciate it, and take care. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, In the Mix. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to hear more, be sure to subscribe. To catch all the latest from Lumiflon, you can visit our website at lumiflonusa.com or follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn at LumiflonUSA. Thanks again. See you next time.